Now, do we absolutely know that the miscarriage was caused by that? Of course we don't. But bearing in mind the stress that caused, the lack of sleep, and the timing of the pregnancy, how many weeks in she was.
The palace finally responded to the rumors that had refused to die. For months, social media buzzed with questions about Archie and Lilibet's true identities, turning every silence into fuel. Now, an official statement has broken through the noise, declaring people deserve clarity. Those words hit like a spark in a dark room, and suddenly every corner of the royal world feels tense, with fans alert and critics ready. Something significant has shifted behind those palace walls, and as the statement spreads like wildfire, everyone wants to know the truth that has finally been revealed. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle's fight against the shadows continues. She was the kind of person who would stop everything to help a lost child find their parents or sit beside someone crying on a park bench. Yet beneath that tender surface, Meghan carried burdens that would crush lesser souls. Standing at the window of her home, watching her children play in the garden, she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that had become her constant companion. She remembered the early days with a clarity that still made her stomach clench, the way conversations would stop when she entered a room, the polite smiles that never quite reached anyone's eyes, the subtle corrections about how she should stand, speak, dress, or even breathe. Nothing she did was right, yet everything she did was scrutinized. She felt like a specimen under glass, examined from every angle by people who had already decided what they would find. But she had survived those days through sheer determination and the love that anchored her. With Harry, she had found strength, and together they weathered storms that would have torn weaker couples apart, building a life beyond the palace walls, carved out on their own terms. Meghan and Harry had carved out a space where they could breathe without permission, a sanctuary where their children could grow free from constant scrutiny, or so she had believed. But now, rumors were rising again like floodwaters that refused to recede, seeping under doors and through cracks, finding her no matter how far she ran. This time, however, the whispers were not about her. They circled her children like vultures, sensing weakness, and that made everything different, made everything unbearable. Archie and Lilibet were her world, her reason for every sacrifice, every hard choice, every sleepless night. When she looked at their faces, she saw only innocence and joy, the pure light that exists before the world teaches you to dim yourself. Archie had inherited her sensitive nature, noticing when others were upset and wanting to make them smile, while Lilibet carried a spark of mischief that reminded Meghan of happier times. They were perfect, untouched, unspoiled by the poison that had tried to seep into their mother's soul. Yet even perfection could not shield them from what was coming. Meghan felt it approaching like a distant thunderstorm, the kind visible on the horizon hours before the first drops fall, the air itself growing heavier with the promise of destruction she could not prevent. Memories returned to her unbidden, as they often did in quiet moments like the afternoon she had stood in a different hallway, still believing that cooperation might earn her acceptance. A conversation that seemed innocent at first, polite words exchanged with someone she barely knew, turned into a gentle warning delivered with such careful courtesy that it took her several seconds to comprehend. There are traditions that guide these matters, the voice had said, soft as silk, smooth with the weight of expectations that had existed for generations, a reminder of the invisible rules she was expected to navigate. The words had been spoken behind a closed door, away from ears that might have made the warning official or actionable, just quiet guidance. Easy to deny later, but impossible to forget. The message was clear, even through its layers of politeness. Her children would always be different, forever measured against unwritten standards more rigid than any law. Their place in the royal world would be conditional, dependent on factors beyond their control. Meghan had smiled politely during the conversation, nodded at the right moments, thanked the speaker for their concern, and then retreated to an empty room to weep, not for herself, no longer for herself, but for Archie, who had not yet learned to walk, and for Lilibet, who had not yet been born, for the burdens they would carry simply by existing, for the questions they would face about their worth, for the endless justifications they would be forced to provide, for taking up space in a world that had decided their place before their first breaths. That day, something shifted inside her. The gentle, trusting part of herself that still believed in fairy tales and happy endings hardened into something stronger and more dangerous. She became a mother bear, teeth bared, claws extended, ready to tear apart anything that threatened her cubs. Determination surged through her like electricity, igniting every nerve, ending with fierce purpose. Whatever the palace hid in its ancient vaults of secrets and shame, Whatever truths they buried beneath layers of protocol and tradition, whatever poison they planned to feed her children about who they were and what they could become, she would not allow it. Her love would be a shield stronger than castle walls, more enduring than any institution. But shields could only protect for so long. Eventually, the storm would arrive, bringing truths too powerful to hide and questions too loud to ignore. She would have to decide whether to keep running or turn and face the lightning. The pressure in her chest made each breath laborious. She was one woman holding back an ocean, trying to protect two small lives from currents that had swept away stronger souls than hers. The truth sat in her throat like a stone, too large to swallow, too dangerous to spit out. How long could she maintain this silence? How long before the weight crushed her or the truth exploded outward, destroying everything in its path? Megan pressed her palm against the cool window glass, watching her children laugh in the sunshine, temporarily safe in their innocence. But storms were coming. She could feel them gathering, and no amount of a mother's love could hold back forever what the universe had already decided to reveal. A storm was coming, one that was never meant to be silent, and Harry felt its approach keenly. He possessed an extraordinary ability to connect with people from all walks of life, treating janitors with the same respect he showed dignitaries, remembering small acts of kindness and repaying them tenfold. There was something profoundly decent about him, a core of goodness that no amount of pain had managed to corrupt. Yet today, that gentle soul felt under siege. He paced the length of his living room, unable to settle, unable to focus on anything except the growing noise surrounding his family. The rumors had begun as distant murmurs, barely audible whispers he tried to ignore, but now they roared like an approaching avalanche, gaining volume and power with each passing day. He recognized the sound because he had heard it before, lived through it before, survived it before, but barely. As a boy, he had struggled to understand why people looked at him differently, why certain conversations produced uncomfortable silences, why his very existence seemed to create tension he could neither name nor resolve. That confusion had turned to hurt, the hurt to anger, and the anger to reckless behavior that nearly destroyed him before he found his way back to solid ground. Now history was circling again, but this time it stalked his children. Archie and Lilibet had done nothing to deserve this scrutiny, committed no crime except being born into a family unable to escape its own patterns of destruction. The thought of them facing the same confusion, the same hurt, the same anger that had nearly consumed their father made Harry feel as if his chest were being crushed from the inside, memories colliding violently with the present and threatening to pull him under once more. The past collided with the present in jarring ways. Harry would be playing with Archie, watching his son's face light up with delight over something simple, and suddenly he would remember being that age himself, feeling the first cold touch of public judgment. Holding Lilibet in his arms, marveling at her innocence, he would flash back to moments when his own innocence had been stripped away by questions he was far too young to understand. The past was not past. It lived, breathed, and reached forward with grasping hands, trying to pull his children into the same darkness that had swallowed parts of his childhood. The warning arrived on a morning that began like any other. Harry sipped coffee, scrolling through messages, his mind occupied with ordinary concerns, when his phone rang with a familiar number, someone whose judgment he trusted implicitly. After a few moments of small talk, the conversation shifted, and Harry sensed it before the words came. "I need to ask you something, and I'm sorry to be the one to bring it up," his friend said. Harry's hand tightened around his cup. "Go ahead. Have you seen what's circulating about Archie and Lilibet? The questions people are asking." The coffee turned bitter on his tongue. "What questions?" There was a pause, the kind that meant the answer would hurt, touching on their place, their legitimacy, their future, the same questions once asked of him. "They're doing it again." The cup slipped from Harry's hand, splashing dark liquid across the table like an omen. His mind raced backward. His mother had faced these battles with everything she had, trying to protect her sons from the machinery of royal expectation, negotiating for small freedoms that other children took for granted, fighting to preserve childhoods filled with love alongside duty. He remembered her fierce determination, but also the exhaustion etched into her eyes, the strain around her mouth, the way her smile sometimes seemed more a mask than true happiness. She had been impossibly strong, but the institution was stronger, grinding down those who did not conform. "Harry, are you still there?" His friend's voice pulled him back. "Yeah, I'm here," he replied, the warning settling like ice in his chest. "I thought you should know before it gets worse, before they make it official." The words echoed long after the call ended. What did that mean? Was the palace planning a formal statement about his children, cementing them forever in a lesser category? Fear gripped him, sharp and cold not for himself, but for Archie, who felt everything deeply, and for Lilibet, who deserved to grow up knowing she was loved and enough, exactly as she was. Old fears surged like floodwaters breaking a dam, and he remembered his mother's tears, the helplessness of being a child who understood something was terribly wrong, but had no power to fix it. The days blurring together under the weight of unspoken truths, Harry wrestled with what to do. He tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for his family, playing with the children, laughing at their jokes, reading bedtime stories with appropriate dramatic flair. But beneath the performance, his mind churned constantly, searching for answers, seeking solutions, trying to shield his family from forces that seemed determined to harm them. Slowly, he understood something fundamental that shifted his entire perspective. Silence was not safety, it was surrender. By staying quiet, by hoping distance would be enough, he was allowing others to control the narrative about his children. He was repeating his mother's mistakes, fighting defensive battles instead of addressing the problem directly. If the palace intended to speak about Archie and Lilibet, he needed to know what they planned to say. If decisions were being made about their future, he had to understand them before they became permanent. He could not fight shadows and speculation. He wanted concrete information, real threats he could confront with clear action. His search began with phone calls to people still inside the palace, individuals who owed him loyalty, friendship, or simply enough decency to share what they knew. Each conversation added another piece to a puzzle he was beginning to dread completing. Meetings were taking place that excluded him discussions about protocol and precedent, consultations with historians and legal experts regarding matters that directly concerned his family. Something was coming, something significant enough that the machinery of the institution had been set in motion, grinding forward with the inexorable momentum of centuries-old tradition. Harry's breaking point arrived quietly, without drama or announcement. He simply woke one morning with absolute certainty that he could not continue living in fear of an unknown threat. The not knowing was worse than any truth could be, the waiting more painful than whatever blow might fall. He would find answers. He would look directly at whatever the palace wanted to hide or reveal. He would face the truth, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful. Harry knew he had to face the truth, because his children deserved a father who fought for them with clear eyes and a full understanding of the battlefield. What answers was he about to uncover? And would they bring peace, or only deepen his fear when silence became impossible? Within the ancient palace walls, tension gathered like storm clouds before a lightning strike. The institution had long kept many secrets, tucking uncomfortable truths into corners where they could remain undisturbed, wrapping awkward facts in layers of protocol until they became invisible. This was how institutions survived, by managing information, controlling narratives, deciding what the world should know and what was better left unspoken. In rooms that had witnessed countless meetings over centuries, officials gathered with faces drawn tight by worry. These were not cruel people, not villains from fairy tales who delighted in causing pain, but administrators, advisors, and protectors of something larger than themselves. They loved the institution, they served with the fierce devotion of believers protecting their faith. The information they held had been kept hidden not from malice, but from what they considered necessity. Years ago, when certain details first emerged, a decision had been made. The monarchy's image must be protected. Public confidence could not be shaken by revelations that might raise uncomfortable questions. The path forward had seemed clear, then maintain silence. Allow assumptions to stand uncorrected. Let time bury what might otherwise cause disruption. Now, that decision haunted them like a ghost demanding acknowledgement. Behind heavy wooden doors that had stood for centuries, muffling countless delicate conversations, they sat around a table worn smooth by the hands of their predecessors, the weight of responsibility pressing down on shoulders already bent by the demands of their positions. Someone had to speak first, break the silence that had grown oppressive. "We cannot continue as we have been," the most senior official finally said, his voice carrying the gravity of centuries of precedent. The voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had fought this battle internally for too long. The whispers have become shouts. The assumptions have hardened into false certainties. We are losing control of a narrative we never properly managed. Around the table, heads nodded slowly, reluctant agreement etched into worried expressions. They had spent years believing that silence was strength, that withholding information equaled protection of the institution. Now, they faced the consequences. A public narrative so far from the truth that correcting it risked the very disruption they had hoped to avoid. Every word must be chosen with extreme care, added a woman who had served the palace through multiple crises, understanding how quickly situations could spiral out of control. One wrong phrase could damage relationships painstakingly built over decades. One misunderstood sentence could fuel speculation worse than what they already faced. They all understood this truth intimately. The monarchy survived through careful management of public perception, through precise calibration of what was revealed and what remained private. They had become experts in the language of implication, masters of saying much while revealing little. Yet this situation demanded something they rarely practiced: direct clarity. How could they acknowledge what had been hidden without explaining why? How could they provide truth without exposing the calculations and fears behind years of concealment? How could they protect the institution while admitting that it had made choices now perceived as deception? "We must consider the children," someone said quietly, and the room fell into a deeper silence. Archie and Lilibet were not abstract concepts or theoretical problems. They were real children who would grow up knowing what had been said about them in palace meeting rooms. Whatever statement emerged from these discussions would follow them throughout their lives, shaping their understanding of their place in a family and an institution that had never fully known how to accommodate them. The pressure came from multiple directions. Public speculation had reached levels that could no longer be ignored. Journalists asked pointed questions that danced around facts, and historians wrote analyses based on assumptions rather than evidence. Most troubling of all, Harry, Meghan, and the children themselves existed in a state of uncertainty that served no one's interests. Years of whispers had created a foundation of half-truths treated as established fact. The longer the palace remained silent, the more those half-truths solidified into accepted reality. Correcting them would require dismantling beliefs people had held for years, challenging narratives they had built their understanding upon. One official pulled out a draft statement, the result of hours of careful drafting and redrafting. Every word had been considered, every nuance weighed, yet even this labor could not erase the tension hanging over the room. Every word in the draft had been weighed for multiple meanings, every phrase tested against worst-case scenarios. The others leaned forward, reading silently, mentally cataloguing potential problems, and imagining how different audiences might interpret identical words. "It's too vague," someone said after a long pause. "It's too specific," another countered immediately. This was the impossible dance, trying to satisfy competing demands that could not all be met simultaneously. They wanted to provide clarity without creating new controversies, offer truth without exposing institutional vulnerabilities, and acknowledge past silence without condemning those who had enforced it. As they debated language and strategy, a larger realization began to settle over the room like dust falling after an explosion. The situation had grown beyond their ability to control it through traditional methods. The truth they held was not like other palace secrets, which could be managed indefinitely through careful silence and strategic misdirection. This truth involved living people whose stories continued to unfold. Children who were growing and would eventually ask questions no protocol could deflect. The palace had always operated on the principle that it controlled information, deciding what the public knew and when. But information in the modern world moved in ways centuries-old institutions were not designed to manage. Whispers spread across continents in seconds, speculation built upon itself without requiring official confirmation, and people formed conclusions based on fragments and shadows, conclusions that influenced reality, whether the palace acknowledged them or not. "We have lost control," the senior official finally admitted, speaking aloud what everyone had been thinking. Perhaps they had lost it years ago, when silence had been chosen over clarity. Perhaps they had never truly had it. But continuing to pretend they could manage this through traditional means was delusional. The admission hung in the air like a confession, breaking the grip that had held them all. They had spent careers believing in the palace's power to shape narratives, to protect the monarchy through careful management of public perception. Acknowledging that power had limits felt like admitting failure. The heavy wooden doors remained closed, but behind them something shifted. The palace, that ancient guardian of secrets and traditions, began the painful process of choosing truth over comfort, clarity over control. What truth was strong enough to push the palace into rare transparency? A statement appeared on a morning that had started like any other, released quietly to the official channels where such communications lived. Yet within moments, its existence rippled outward like stones dropped into still water, creating waves that reached shores far beyond the palace walls. The statement began with an unprecedented directness, acknowledging that confusion had surrounded Archie and Lilibet from their earliest days, that questions had been asked and assumptions made, and that their heritage and status had become subjects of speculation serving no one well. Rather than dancing around uncomfortable facts with the vague language typical of royal communications, these words landed with clarity that felt almost shocking. The children's heritage reflects the beautiful complexity of a modern family. The statement read, bringing together different backgrounds, cultures, and traditions in ways that strengthen rather than diminish their connection to the institution. Simple words, but they carried weight precisely because they had been absent for so long. The palace was not merely acknowledging Archie and Lilibet's mixed heritage, it was celebrating it. The statement framed the children's heritage as valuable rather than problematic, presenting diversity as strength rather than complication. It moved methodically through years of accumulated rumors, addressing each with a patience that suggested genuine care had gone into the response. Questions about the children's skin color, their place in succession, their titles, and their relationship to the broader royal family all received direct answers, leaving little room for continued speculation. One rumor had suggested the children's status was uncertain, that their place in the family remained undefined or conditional. The palace demolished this assumption with precise language, explaining exactly where Archie and Lilibet stood in the line of succession, what titles they held or would hold, and what their relationship to the crown meant legally and ceremonially. There was no ambiguity, no hedging, no room for interpretation that might fuel further gossip. Their position has never been in question within these walls, the statement declared. Any confusion existed externally, not internally. Another persistent whisper concerned the circumstances surrounding the children's births, early days, and christenings events handled differently from previous royal births, which had fueled speculation about rifts and rejections. The palace addressed this with explanations about parental choices, modern approaches to privacy, and the family's respect for Harry and Meghan's wishes regarding their children's early lives. Different does not mean disapproved, the communication emphasized. The family has evolved, as all families must, accommodating various approaches to raising children while maintaining core values and connections. Each rumor received similar treatment. Direct acknowledgement followed by clear explanation. No detail was too small to address if it had caused genuine confusion. The palace was systematically dismantling years of speculation, replacing half-truths with clarity. The statement worked to pull apart assumptions that had hardened into false certainties, replacing shadows with light. Perhaps most striking was the section explaining why this clarity had taken so long to arrive. Here, the tone shifted slightly, becoming reflective, almost regretful. The institution acknowledged that silence had been chosen deliberately, that the decision to withhold explicit statements about the children had been made with reasoning that now appeared flawed. We believed that privacy served as protection, the palace admitted. We thought that by saying less, we would shield the children from excessive attention and allow them to grow up with minimal scrutiny. We did not adequately anticipate how silence creates space for speculation, or how absence of official information would be filled with unofficial assumptions. The explanation continued, revealing layers of institutional thinking rarely glimpsed by the public. Concern about saying too much too soon, about defining the children before they could define themselves, about imposing royal expectations on young people whose parents had chosen a different path. There had been fear that any official statement might constrain future choices, limiting options rather than protecting possibilities. We also confronted our own uncertainties. The statement confessed with remarkable honesty. Questions about how to honor tradition while embracing change, how to maintain institutional consistency while respecting individual freedom, how to speak clearly without speaking prematurely. These questions had paralyzed them into silence far longer than they should have. The palace admitted that fear of misinterpretation had ironically guaranteed misinterpretation, that trying to avoid controversy had created controversy, and that efforts to protect had instead exposed. They acknowledged that good intentions had produced harmful outcomes, that institutional caution had failed the very people it meant to safeguard. We were wrong, the statement concluded simply. Not in our intentions, but in our methods. Not in our desire to protect, but in our understanding of what protection mandated. We apologize for the confusion our silence created, for the speculation it allowed to flourish, for the pain uncertainty may have caused. Reading these words produced a strange mixture of emotions that was difficult to name or separate. There was comfort in finally having clarity, in seeing the institution acknowledge error, and in knowing that Archie and Lilibet's place was affirmed officially and publicly. Relief washed over those who had long carried the burden of uncertainty. The explicit statements dissolved years of harmful rumors, offering comfort, yet alongside it lingered something unsettling. The admission of institutional failure, however honest, raised new questions about what other silences might be causing similar harm. The revelation that protective instincts had been so badly miscalculated suggested fallibility in an institution many assumed operated with certainty. The apology, while welcome, could not undo years of speculation that had already shaped public perception and perhaps private pain. The statement felt both like an ending and a beginning, closing one chapter of confusion while opening another, one of reckoning with how that confusion had been allowed to persist for so long. It offered answers while prompting new questions about institutional evolution, family dynamics, and the ongoing challenge of balancing tradition with change. Meghan sat beside Harry in their California home, tablet resting between them, displaying words that would change everything yet again. Her hand found his automatically, their fingers intertwining with the practiced ease of two people who had learned to anchor each other through impossible situations. The palace statement glowed on the screen, each sentence a small earthquake reshaping the landscape they had navigated for years. Relief flooded through her first, warm and unexpected, loosening tension she had carried so long it had become part of her body's normal state. The truth was finally public. The confusion that had swirled around her children like toxic fog was being cleared by official acknowledgement. Archie and Lilibet's place, their heritage, their value all confirmed in language that left no room for continued speculation. They finally said it, she whispered, her voice catching slightly. They actually said the children belong. Harry's grip tightened on her hand. His face held conflicting emotions that flickered too quickly to name individually. Vindication, anger, sadness, hope all competing for dominance. It shouldn't have taken this long. They shouldn't have had to demand this acknowledgement at all. Yet beneath the relief, unease stirred like something waking from sleep. The world would now interpret these words through countless lenses, each reader bringing their own assumptions and biases, and the full impact of the statement would unfold in ways the palace could never fully control. Victory for Meghan and Harry's position was clear, yet perception would always vary. Some would see it as validation of their struggle, others as the palace yielding to pressure, and still others would twist even the clearest language to fit their preferred narratives. The truth is out there now, Meghan said slowly, but that doesn't mean everyone will accept it as truth. They sat in silence, processing what this moment meant, how it would reshape their relationship with an institution they had left but could never fully escape. Their children's futures had just been redefined by words written in rooms they would never enter, by people they might never meet, guided by centuries-old considerations. In one such room, Charles stood by a window overlooking gardens that had witnessed countless royal dramas. The king carried himself with a dignity born from decades of preparation, yet today it felt fragile, threatened by emotions no amount of royal training could resolve. He was a man shaped by duty, yet also a father, and that heartache cut deeply. "We should have done this years ago," he said quietly to the empty room, his reflection older than he felt inside. William entered without knocking, the heir bearing his own mixture of duty and family love. They both stared at the gardens, seeing different things, but sharing the weight of realization. "The world is already interpreting," William said neutrally. Charles nodded. Truth rarely arrives unfiltered. Whatever the public thought now would echo through generations, shaping how George, Charlotte, and Louis understood family, cousins, and history. "We failed them," Charles admitted suddenly, surprising even himself. "Not intentionally, but we failed nonetheless. We let silence become harm when we meant it to be protection." William had no reply that would not either criticize the institution he would one day lead or defend choices he privately questioned. He simply stood beside his father, sharing the burden. Servants and staff sensed the shift too. Long-time employees like Margaret, loyal for decades, felt the air itself change. Conversations turned cautious, old certainties faltered. Advisors who had championed silence began questioning their judgment, wondering whether caution had protected or merely delayed inevitable reckoning. For younger staff, the statement represented progress, a willingness to acknowledge error that hinted at institutional evolution. The palace, once operating with near absolute certainty, now faced subtle tremors of uncertainty. Questions multiplied. If silence had harmed when it meant to protect, what other silences required examination? If institutional caution had failed, what did effective care demand? The tension was contemplative, not hostile. A palace confronting its limitations, reconsidering traditions, and quietly imagining how to better serve the family it existed to protect. In corners once unthinkable, conversations began, asking when tradition helped and when it hindered, opening the doors to change in a place built on centuries of unchallenged routines. New questions began spreading quietly within the palace as the truth settled in. Questions about what values should guide decisions now that old certainties had been shaken. At the center of it all were the children who had changed everything. Archie possessed his mother's observant nature wrapped in his father's tender heart. A small boy who noticed butterflies and asked gentle questions about why people sometimes looked sad. His sweetness radiated outward like sunlight, warming everyone fortunate enough to spend time with him. He shared toys without being asked, hugged freely, and laughed with a joy unburdened by the complicated world that had spent years debating his existence. He loved bugs and stories, splashing in puddles, and the sound of his little sister saying his name. In his innocence, he carried hope for something better, representing the possibilities his family had fought desperately to protect. Though too young to fully understand, Archie now stood at the center of something larger than himself. Lilith, younger still, remained blissfully unaware of the storms that had raged around her existence. She toddled through her days with the pure joy of discovery, delighting in ordinary things and in her brother's attention, secure in the love of her parents, which wrapped around her like invisible armor. Her laughter rang through their California home, untouched by knowledge of how her birth had been dissected and debated, or how her very existence had become a battleground for people she could not comprehend. Together, the children embodied something Harry and Meghan had struggled to articulate. Love that transcends tradition, heritage that can be complex without being problematic, and a future that need not replicate the past to honor it. They were simply children deserving of childhood, yet they had become symbols of change an institution was only beginning to embrace. Harry and Meghan watched their children play with hearts full of fierce protectiveness, softened by cautious hope. The palace statement had provided the clarity they had desperately wanted, but clarity alone could not guarantee peace. They began making deliberate plans for the years ahead, choosing paths designed to keep Archie and Lilith grounded despite the extraordinary circumstances of their birth. "We tell them the truth," Meghan said one evening, her voice firm with conviction born from her own experiences with hidden realities. Age-appropriate truth, but truth nonetheless. They need to understand who they are before the world tells them who they should be. Harry nodded, remembering his own childhood confusion, the unanswered questions, the assumptions no one explained. They'll know they're loved. That comes first. Before titles, institutions, or any of it. They'll know they're enough exactly as they are. Their plans were simple but deliberate. Normal schools where possible, friendships outside royal circles, experiences that built character rather than privilege, time with both sides of the family when relationships allowed, and protection from excessive scrutiny without isolation from reality. They would teach Archie and Lilith about their heritage in all its complexity, the royal lineage, the American roots, the traditions worth preserving, and the changes worth making. History would shape them, but it would not define their entire future. The palace itself was learning uncomfortable lessons about adaptation. An institution that had survived centuries through rigid control was discovering some things could not be controlled, that evolution was sometimes necessary, and that protecting the monarchy's future might require releasing its past. Trust had been damaged with Harry and Meghan, with the public, and within the family itself. Rebuilding would demand more than statements. It required consistent action, demonstrated values, and proof that lessons learned would translate into changed behavior. Senior advisors sought perspectives they had once dismissed as too modern, too radical, too divorced from tradition. They asked difficult questions about the monarchy's role in a changing world, about balancing relevance with history, and about what values should guide decisions for the next generation. "We cannot simply return to how things were," one longtime advisor admitted, the words painful but necessary. "The old certainties no longer serve us. We must discover new certainties built on honesty rather than comfortable silence." Small changes began to ripple through the palace. More transparency in communications, greater consideration for individual family members' wishes, and a willingness to explain decisions rather than expecting obedience to unexplained protocol. Tentative and awkward at first, These steps signaled a direction that had once seemed impossible. The royal family stood at a threshold, looking toward a future that remained uncertain, yet felt more hopeful than the recent past. Archie and Lilibet, innocent at the heart of so much turmoil, would grow up in a world their very existence had helped transform. They would face challenges, certainly being royal in any era carried burdens. But perhaps those burdens would now be lighter, more honestly acknowledged, and less shadowed by secrets that poisoned from within. The next chapter of the royal family remained unwritten, dependent on choices not yet made, shaped by children still learning to tie their shoes, and by institutions learning to evolve. Yet, for the first time in years, the possibility of genuine healing existed. Fragile as new growth, but real nonetheless. And in the California home where they played, Archie and Lilibet were blissfully unaware that they had already changed everything simply by being exactly who they were.